Hey YouTube, it's Robert Hall, and in today's video we're going to talk about reflectors, namely this new weird one. So the reflector, this type of reflector, not the reflector that goes on a strobe, has always been a really versatile tool for photography. You can use one to modify natural light, which I always laugh when natural light photographers use a reflector because they're kind of not really using just natural light, but then they won't use a strobe. That never made sense to me. Anyways, another thing you can do with it is use a reflector in a studio to act as a second light source. So to bounce light from a strobe, and now you've got a second light source. The reflector panel itself is kind of acting as a second light source. So that's really nice because if you're limited to a set amount of strobes, you can always technically add a light by adding a reflector in. And you can control the bounce that you get by changing the angle of the reflector as well as how close or far away it is to the other light source. Now we have all sorts of light reflectors. I've got a portable but massive scrim reflector. I've got a reflector that stays in the studio that's kind of linked up on a stand. And then I've got a ton of these small collapsible reflectors. They pack up anywhere, really small, really slim, easy to add to a kit. There's all sorts of them. Now, I'm not going to pretend to you that there's not 1,000 different varieties of reflectors that all essentially do the same thing, which bounce light, cut light, or diffuse light. It's pretty much what the 5-in-1 reflector has done forever. In a 5-in-1 reflector, you've normally got diffusion, so you can use it as a gobo between a light source and diffuse the light. Then you've got white to bounce soft light. Then you've got silver to bounce light a little bit harder. Then you've got black. Black you can use as negative fill to cut light away from one side of bounce. And then you've also got gold, which I don't know if anybody still uses that. I haven't used the gold side of a 5-in-1 reflector since I've never used it. I've actually never used it, but that is an option if you're interested in the gold, if you want to bounce a more golden light. So the reflector hasn't changed in a long time. Like I said, there's hundreds of options in choosing that, but I did just get sent this one and it's interesting. It's, if you can see, it's semi-transparent and it's still silver, and it's silver on both sides. It's got these handles. This is a glow reflector, and the reason that it has that transparent look is it's actually designed to let wind pass through it, which I thought was actually a pretty creative design. Now in terms of these, there are 4 sizes. They're silver on both sides. They have these handles on the sides, and those handles have 1/4 threads on one side and 3/8 thread on the other side, so you could also mount these to a stand. So again, the whole purpose of these being threaded is just so when you're holding them outside, they're not blowing away really hard, which allows you to A, put them on a stand and not worry about them falling over as much, or just give your assistant or whoever's helping you an easier time in holding it because it's not going to be acting as a parasail. But when I got this design, I'm not gonna lie, I had a few questions. First, do they make a weird lighting pattern? Now I was curious because these have so many holes in them, is it gonna create this like scattered light pattern when it's bouncing light? And surprisingly, no, it still acts as a unified light source. So you don't see a bunch of variance in highlights or shadows. It doesn't look like dappled light when it's reflecting. It still seems to act as a single light source, which is good because you don't want that ugly lighting pattern as a reflector. My next question was, do these bounce less light? I tested this against a similarly sized, completely silver reflector, and this one did bounce about a half stop less light. So yeah, it is a little bit less efficient, which isn't surprising considering some light is going to be going through it. Finally, are they actually any easier to use outside? And this is a split answer. For the smaller ones, no, not really. Even in high wind, it's just not a difficult thing to hold a reflector of this size, which I'm making sure I get it all in frame. But when you get into their larger ones, yeah, it makes a big difference, especially when you're holding it, but more so when you're using it on a stand. You don't have to worry about the bigger ones flying away as much because they let so much wind pass through it. Now these are also priced really competitively to other reflectors, although I do have some concerns about this type of material holding up for a long time. I would think that it would be really easy to snag this material and start creating bigger holes in here. So I would worry about this lasting a really long time. Not that I expect any reflector to last forever, but I would just imagine these are gonna wear out significantly faster. So who do I think this type of reflector is for? Well, To me, a 5-in-1 reflector is just going to be more versatile than this. Since this is silver on both sides, you don't have any flexibility. You can't make this white or make this black for negative fill or use it as a diffuser. It's just not going to work as good as a 5-in-1 reflector in any of those scenarios. So if you're using a reflector and you like the versatility, you're often changing the sides or using it as a diffuser or switching between white and silver bounce. Obviously, this is not going to be a satisfactory replacement, so I would just avoid it. But if you find yourself always using the silver side of a reflector and you're working a lot outdoors and you're finding that this is getting blown all over the place, then this would be a good pick for you. For me, I might keep the big one in the car for on location work, but for most purposes, I think I'll stick with the standard 5-in-1 reflector. I think the interesting part though is that we're seeing these type of lighting modifiers that are really geared towards a specific audience. Like 90% of people would probably be okay with their 5-in-1 traditional reflector, but for the 10% who do see this as a valuable tool, now it's available to them. Okay guys, those are my thoughts on these new glow reflectors. They're linked below in the description, as well as some of the typical 5-in-1 reflectors that I like and use more often. So you can check those out if you're interested in purchasing any of them. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos, and until next time, keep on shooting, YouTube.